Shalom, shalom. This is Elder Isaac Hill, Restorers of Truth Ministries, sharing with you another scripture nugget coming from the Torah. Specifically today, we're going to be looking at Deuteronomy chapter 6, and really the whole chapter, but we're going to bring a synopsis or a summary, if you will, of this chapter instead of going the complete chapter. We just want to share you a scripture nugget out of this chapter. Now, this chapter, I would call it one of my favorites of all the chapters in the book of Deuteronomy, because it teaches us the instructions for how to guard the Torah, how to guard His Word. And specifically in this chapter, you'll find three things particular that really stands out. There's a pattern here. Now, initially, Moses, he begins by saying, and this is the command, the laws, and the right rulings, which Yahweh, Yahuwah, however you want to pronounce it, if you're coming from Paleo-Hebrew, however. But it says that your Elohim has commanded to teach you to do in the land which you are passing over to possess, so that you fear Yahweh, your Elohim, to guard all His laws and His command, which I command you, you and your son and your grandson. Now he's talking about a lineage here. Anytime there's a mentioning of your son and then your grandson or your children and your children's children, he's talking about a lineage. And we're going to touch on that in just a moment. But it says that all the days of your life, in verse 2, and that your days be prolonged. But I want to focus on, I read that so we can come to verse 3, when he says, and you shall hear, O Israel, and shall guard to do. And there's a theme throughout all the Tanakh and throughout all references of the Torah. When you hear the word guard, it specifically ties in to the Torah, because there's something that all of us would have to do, and Israel had to do it. That is to learn to guard the Torah. And we're going to see in this chapter, what does it mean to guard? In verse 4 is what I really like. He begins by saying, "Hear, O Israel, our Elohim, Yahweh is one." Now this is referenced as the Shema, one of the, not necessarily the sacred, but the most important distinctively thing that separates Yah's people from any other people is understanding the Shema. The Shema, or the Shema, definitely references that Yah is distinctively separate. He's distinctively different. He's not like any other deity, or should I say even false deity, because there's none beside him. But this is the Shema, which entails to hear, to listen, and to obey. To hear, to listen, to obey. But this is the most important thing. If there's no Shema, then there's no faith. I mean, we can just throw everything out. But he says, "Hear, O Israel, our Elohim, Yahweh is one," or the Hebrew word for one is God. E-C-H-A-D, God is one. Is one. Now, right there, that tells us that there is no other. He's one. He's one. It's not like the other nations who believe in polytheism, which is a multiple or plurality of deities. He's one. He's one. So the Shema entails to hear, to listen, to obey, but also to understand the God that He's one. He's one. So now let's skip to verse 6. This is what I call part 1 of this really particular chapter. He says, "And these words which I command or am commanding you today shall be in your heart." I like to call this part the placement of Torah. The placement of Torah. That's the whole aim or purpose of Torah, is to get it into the heart of the people. Now we're talking about not exactly as in the telios, or the goal as in Messiah is the goal, because that's what Torah is all about. But in essence, the placement of Torah should be in the heart. Now, why did He choose to place Torah in the heart? Why He could have left it in written in stones, but He wanted it in the heart, because what's in the heart, mankind will always do. If it's in your heart, it's easily done. It's easily carried out. I can easily process it because it's in my heart. Now look at this. Now that's part 1, is to place the Torah into the heart. The heart, the seat of man. Again, because if it's in the heart, you do it. Now, in verse 7, 8, and 9, what he's telling us now is, "You shall impress them upon your children, and shall speak of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates." What is he doing now? He's taking us to part 2. Part 2 is simply saying, I want to take you through some processes or some steps in order to get Torah into your heart. First, he tells us to guard the Torah so the Torah can be in your heart. Now he's telling us what does the steps that's required to get that Torah into your heart. Now, some look at this specifically in verse 8, when he's making really references to phylacteries or the tefillin, the boxes that you place and bind on your heart, on your hand, or between your eyelids or your forehead. And so that's fine. But remember, it doesn't take away the plan or the purpose or the intent of Torah, which is to be placed in your heart. It doesn't take that away, because ultimately, that's where we're going to be judged by, what's in our heart. Now, I'm not criticizing anyone about the phylacteries or the tefillin. I'm just saying that ultimately, it's all about the heart. If you can have the Torah into your heart, that's where you're going to be judged by. Now look at this. Now that's part 2. Part 1, he tells us where the Torah should be, which is the heart. Part 2, he tells us processes or gives us steps. And the reason he gives us steps is because, specifically as it references Israel, is that Israel has come from approximately 400 years without their land, 400 years from the Mizraim group of deities. So everywhere they went in Egypt and Mizraim, they saw images and practices of the deities of Egypt, the deity of Mizraim. And that's what they saw. So everywhere they went, from generation to generation, while they are in captivity, all they saw was the false deity. And so now Yahweh is saying we have to, paraphrasing, get the people into a habit or a practice, if you will, of walking in my rule, walking in my way, walking in my Torah. So he takes them through practices or steps or avenues, if you will, to get that word, to get the Torah into their heart. So there's frontlets, there's steppings, there are things that if you will, lifestyles and practices and applications to help us remember the Torah. Because see, when you do things routinely, you remember those things. It's a constant basis. It's a constant basis, the Torah, the Word. So what he's trying to get us to do is to see the Word everywhere we go. You have the phylacteries, the tefillin, the mezuzah, the small cases that they placed on the doorpost. It's all a process to help them remember. Remember, after 400 and some years, I mean, there has to be a deprogramming. If you do something long enough, you have to be reprogrammed or deprogrammed. And so it takes a while. It takes processing, because ultimately the goal is to be in your heart. Now, from verse 10 through verse 25, if you will, and this is the third part, this is the last part of this Scripture Nugget, is that he tells them basically to be on guard or to watch out, because now the third part is the blessing. Look what it says. He says in verse 10, and it shall be when Yahweh, your Elohim, brings you into the land of which he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to your sheep, and to Yaakov, to give you great and good cities which you did not build, and houses filled with all kinds of goods which you did not fill, and wells dug which you did not dig, vineyards and olive trees which you did not plant, and you shall eat and be satisfied. Look, he says in verse 12, he says, be on guard lest you forget. You see, after the blessing, sometimes we forget who gave us the blessing. Sometimes we focus on ourselves as if it's by our achievement, our wisdom, our knowledge. But Yahweh doesn't want them to forget, because again, it's easy to forget. It's easy to become at ease in Zion, if you will. So he goes on and he teaches them about when you let your guard down, be careful, because you're going to forget my Torah. You're going to mingle. You're going to try to blend in. You're going to try to accept the other nations and their deities. So he says to be on guard. So part one, we saw that he wants us to be or to guard the Torah because he wants to place the Torah in our heart. Part two, he shows us that there are practices that we can do, development of applications, processes in order to guard the Torah. The third thing he showed us was to watch the blessing, but stay focused. I will bless you, but I want you to stay focused. So when you read this chapter, you see those three things, those three phrases, if you will, three parts. And I like to call this the instructions. We have to guard it, we have to protect it, but yet we have to also realize we want the instructions to pour into our heart. Shalom and blessings. See you next time on Scripture Nugget.